Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Donna and today I'm going to show you how to make a sourdough starter. Now you might be asking yourself, why even bother making a sourdough starter, feeding it, caring for it? Well, I like it because basically it replaces yeast for me. So it can replace yeast in your baking needs. It can even replace baking powder. So that's why I keep a sourdough starter. I believe it also helps with breaking down the properties that are in wheat. So if you have more of a gluten intolerance, I believe it helps with some of that properties as well. Once you get your sourdough starter up and going, you can feed it indefinitely and you can just keep it going for as long as you need. If you need a break from your sourdough starter, you can do things like keeping it in the fridge and putting it on a hold and then restarting it back up again. I believe you can keep it in the fridge for like a month, which is pretty cool. If you haven't seen my video on my easy maintenance sourdough, I will link that in the description below. It's basically the easy cheater method, I would say. I don't know. I just keep it really simple. It's my super easy, simple method for caring for my sourdough. So check that video out if you're looking for more about maintaining your sourdough from here on out.
Welcome back to our channel.
You say we're making sourdough starter.
We decided so strong because it's so good. Pancakes and cakes and waffles. Oh, I just forgot. And muffins. Cakes, muffins, and crepes, pancakes, and waffles. And muffins. Yeah. Things and bread.
Let's cover the two big items that I feel like everyone's got questions about what you can use. First off, we're going to be using whole wheat flour. Now you can use whole wheat flour or rye flour. You can use all-purpose flour, but I will say that based on what I've read, you want to make sure that it is unbleached all-purpose flour. Now the reason for that is because once they bleach it, they are killing all of the wild yeast that is in the flour. So that is why we're going to be using whole wheat flour today. Now, if you're like me, I was like, I don't know if my flour is bleached or not. I use all-purpose flour all the time. It doesn't say bleached all-purpose flour. So it's in the ingredients that you have to look. They will use things like chloride and benzoyl peroxide to bleach the flour. So if you see those ingredients, particularly I saw benzoyl peroxide in my all-purpose flour and I knew that it was bleached. So that is why we're using whole wheat flour. You're going to be feeding your starter for 4 to 5 days initially here, so you want to make sure that you have enough whole wheat flour to do all those feedings, and you'll be feeding a 1/4 cup of flour each day. Okay, the next big one is water. So this water is from the tap, and what I did to remove the chlorine, because you don't want chlorine in your water, it kills the good bacteria. So what I did with this water is I have it's just tap water, but I put it in an open jar. This is just a cloth cover to keep my children's fingers out of it. I've just covered this jar with this little cloth cover and I've let it sit for 24 hours, allowing the chlorine to naturally dissipate. If you need to speed this process up and you're in a rush, you can boil your water for 15 to 20 minutes and it removes the chlorine. Let's cover the items that we are going to be needing today to make our sourdough starter. You're going to need a small jar. I just have a little mason jar. Then I have something to cover it with. I have some elastic bands, something to stir the mixture with. I have some whole wheat flour. I have some water and a measuring cup for the water. Okay, so what I'm going to start with here is my little jar, and I'm going to start with 1/4 cup of flour. I should have picked a slightly wider mouthed jar, I think, but alas, such is life. I could have just used a funnel at this rate. Maybe next time, maybe tomorrow I'll be smarter about this and have the funnel ready to go. And my 1/4 cup of water. And we're just gonna give that a really good stir so that it's all nice and combined. The consistency of your sourdough starter is runny, like pancake batter. I know some people don't do measurements at all, they just kind of eyeball it, and you could probably get away with it if you are keeping the consistency consistent, basically. So now that we have this flour and water mixture all combined, I'm just going to mark it with an elastic band. This will be more important later when you are trying to see how much your sourdough has risen. So I'm going to use an elastic band to mark the jar and the level that the sourdough is currently at. And then I'm just going to cover it with my little cloth and just a couple more elastic bands. This is just to keep insects, children out of the jar. It's still a cloth, so things can still pass back and forth through this barrier. If you don't have a nice little cloth fabric cover, I've seen people using a coffee filter. I've also read that you can just cover it with a plate. This I just find is a little bit easier for my setup, so just depending on what you have. And when you want to store it in a warm area, you want to be around 82 degrees Fahrenheit to 95 degrees Fahrenheit, or 28 degrees Celsius to 35 degrees Celsius for 24 hours. So that's the temperature range that we're looking for. So I'm going to put this in a dark place in my pantry. You want to put it in a warmer place, and then tomorrow we are going to feed it again.
What is that?
This is the sourdough. This is the sourdough on the first day. So it's got lots of liquid on it.
I love these kids.
It doesn't have too stinky of a smell, but you can see it's got lots of liquid on the top. So from here we are going to discard half of it, and then we're going to add a 1/4 cup of flour and a 1/4 cup of water again. It's recommended to use whole rye or whole wheat flour because it contains more microorganisms than all-purpose flour. To put your sourdough on hold for up to a month between uses, you store it in the refrigerator, and then to revive it, you would discard half of it and feed the remainder with flour and water, and they recommend letting it stand for 24 hours before using it. If you don't want to throw away any portion of this, because we are discarding every day, that's totally understandable. I don't like discarding it and getting rid of it altogether. You can make yourself something, like use it in crepe batter, use it in pancake batter right away. This will help you judge if your mixture is just right or it's sour enough to your taste. Sourdough is an art, and it becomes an obsession. I will tell you that. Sourdough needs tender, loving care. I call it my pet. It's part of my pet world. Like my chickens are my pet, my sourdough is my pet, my kombucha SCOBY is my pet. So it needs love, it needs care every day. I just wanted to show you guys where I am keeping the sourdough in my pantry, just tucked in right here, out of the sun, in a place that's high enough the children are not getting at it. And look how much it has risen. I have 2 jars because the discard, so this is the original jar, and I took the discard out and I actually put it in this jar instead of discarding it. I fed it as well, and I'm gonna use this in the waffle recipe here. So you can see the elastic band is marking where it was, and you can see how much it has grown, which I think is super cool. Like, look at that, it's doubled. This is day 2. We're going to take it out, we're going to discard half of this one and feed it, and this one we're just going to feed and probably, like I said, use it in a waffle recipe right away. Day 2, let's take a look at this thing. Like, oh my gosh. Look at that. You can see the liquid there. You can't see it like bubbly, but let me give it a stir and show you. Like, it's already active. Like, that wild yeast is so cool. Okay, we're gonna discard half of this and then feed it again. A 1/4 cup of flour, a 1/4 cup of water. Actually, before I do that, I'm gonna show you guys. This is the other one. Can you hear it? Like this is day 2. I've been reading and it's like you can do these like discard and addition for like endlessly, right? The recipe that I am following says to do it for 3 to 5 days. So that's what I'm following. And then by around day 4, your starter should be quite active. So that is really cool. After 3 to 5 days, the sourdough will produce a lot of bubbles in a continuous fashion, and it is then ready to be used. Through experimentation and finding recipes that you like and information that you slowly gather over time, you will eventually like just know the ideal sourdough for your tastes, and you'll be able to play with the parameters of like temperature and moisture and maintenance and stuff like that to hit the perfect sourdough, like sourness, acidity, I guess, level that you like. So I just want to show you the jar. This is the jar that I normally keep my sourdough starter in. I like it because it's so open. I can easily take scoops right out of it, and it's clear so you can see everything that's going on. This is all the discard that I have, and I've been feeding it. And oh my gosh, the smell on it is way more potent. It's way more active today. Lots more bubbles on it. I should have put a tape line so you guys could see how active it's been. This little one is the starter that we have going that I'm gonna basically call my OG starter. And you can see from the elastic band line, crazy lots of growth, like double in growth size. And we're on day 3 now. It's very active, very bubbly. It definitely has like that same kind of smell on it as my discard. Now the discard that I have in the bigger jar here, I'm actually going to use it up and I'm going to start making stuff with it. So feel free to check out some other recipe videos. There's tons of great ideas out there on like discard recipes, so you're not wasting it. This one, I'm still going to remove half of it and feed it again here, a 1/4 cup. I was doing some research and heard that the older your sourdough starter is, like the longer you've kept it alive and fed it, then the more robust it is. It'll have more exposure, it'll be able to thrive a little bit more, like when you're putting it on holidays in your fridge and stuff, and it'll revive a lot easier, and yeah, it'll have been exposed to maybe more kinds of flour, so more kinds of wild yeast, which is really interesting. So it's supposed to be, yeah, like I said, more robust and really good for you. So that's why people really pride themselves on how old their sourdough starter can be. With my discard, I know some people are definitely like, don't ever use the discard, you can't until it's so many days old, etc., etc. Like, this is my discard and I'm just continuing to feed it. So I'm basically taking the half from the OG and putting it in here and feeding it and treating it like another original. So I am feeding it probably more, and because I'm going to use it, and just in anticipation of that. I don't like waste. I don't know, some people were like, you can compost it, you could probably cook it up and feed it to your chickens or something, or you can make it into pancakes and crepes. But yeah, I just like, the whole point of the sourdough is that it's a long fermented product, so it breaks down like the gluten and stuff in the flour so that it becomes easier to digest. So since this will be day 3, and then day 4, by the time I start using this stuff, I feel like it will be active enough to hopefully make some real bread. But yeah, there are options, you know, with your discard, and tons of great, you know, inspiration and recipes and ideas on what you can do with it if you're like me and you just don't like to waste it. But this is my solution for the discard for making a sourdough starter. I'm basically like making another one that is gonna be used up right away here. I also noticed some people were screwing on the lid, like on these, you know, mason jars and stuff. It comes with a lid, but I also noticed some people having some trouble with that. I think like sourdough needs to breathe. So that's why I really like the cloth choice, the cloth cover. And I've seen it, yeah, like I showed, if you don't have a cloth cover, you can use a coffee filter. These jars are really awesome, these glass ones, because the lid is it's just resting on it. So I feel like it's still getting fairly good oxygen exposure. And yeah, it's not perfectly sealed. So that's why I really like this jar. It's fantastic. So that's the end of day 3 here. And tomorrow is day 4. We are going to be doing this for 5 days to see how active our original starter can get. Oh, I forgot to move the elastic band here so that we can keep track of how much it's going to grow. I'm going to put some tape on this one too so we can see how active it gets tomorrow. I got a ton of this discard ready to go and very bubbly and active. Oh, it's lovely. I'm just gonna give it a stir. Today we're gonna be making Nova Scotia brown bread. And then I think I'm gonna make waffles as well, just to use it up. Yeah. Oh, don't taste that. It's not ready yet. I'm going to use a whopping 2/3 of a cup for this recipe to try and get this discard used up. Oh, I wanted to try something today. Okay, so I wanted to try this. I just saw that you can do a float test to see how active your starter is. So you take a scoop of it in water in a cup and you just drop it in. This might be too much. Oh, ha ha ha. If it sinks, it's not very active. And if it floats, then it's active. So obviously this starter is sunk. It needs to be fed. So I haven't quite waited 24 hours. I've waited more like 12 hours for this starter today. Again, it's doubled about half, as you can see from this elastic band marking. So I want to take some of the starter before I stirred it in and do the water test, and look, it totally floats, meaning it's very active and ready for use, which I thought was a really neat way to test your starter out. So I'm going to discard half of it again. First I'm going to mix it together and then discard it. The reason you want to discard every day is because you want to feed your sourdough in a 1:1:1 ratio. So 1 portion sourdough, 1 portion flour, 1 portion water. So if you don't discard, then you have to increase the amount of flour and water that you feed your sourdough. You have to increase how much you feed your sourdough in flour and water exponentially. So that is, it's just crazy. It's too much. So that's why you discard when you're doing this and when you're feeding sourdough. I'm just going to add this to my discard pot. Until I have about 1/4 of a cup left. Okay, and then my discard pot, there is a lot in there, but I'm going to be using it here right away, so I think I'm going to feed it later today, and then I'm going to use it in a cabbage pancake recipe. This is day 5 on the sourdough. This is my OG. He got a little flat, so I fed him last night at 10 p.m. It's now 4 o'clock the next day, and it was bubbly all the way up to the rim, and then now it all went flat. So that tells me that I actually probably needed to feed him way earlier in the day today, and so he's more than on a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio. So I wanted to talk about the 1-to-1-to-1 ratio that I read, and that's what we've been doing, like 1 part sourdough, 1 part flour, and 1 part water. And that has been good for the beginning part of this journey and feeding my new sourdough starter. So like I would say up to day 3. And then on day 4, I started to notice that it would rise and then it starts to fall. So 24 hours was too long. This starter is eating more food than what I'm giving it. And so on day 4, I fed it twice that day. I fed it once in the morning and then I fed it again in the evening. So day 5 here, I should have done the same thing. And that just tells me that either my house is at the optimal temperature, my starter is really active and needs to be fed more, and that's a great thing. I know this starter is active, it's ready to be used, but I have to keep in mind that now I either need to decrease the amount of my starter and then continue to use like the quarter cup water and flour, so then it's not a 1-to-1-to-1, it's more like a, I don't know how they call it, like a 1-to-3-to-3, so 1 part sourdough and 3 parts flour, 3 parts water, something like that. So anyway, so I gotta keep feeding it more and more and more, or decrease the amount of starter that I initially have, because the more starter you have, the more you have to feed it. So this is now gonna be, sorry, not this, this is my water. This is gonna be what I transfer all of my starter to pretty soon. I have some discard in it and I'm gonna be making some dinner rolls, and then I'm going to use all this up, and then I'm going to transfer this little guy into this jar. I love this jar because it's so open, and then I can reach in really easily. And then anything that I'm not using, if I don't have time, I'm going to be storing him in the fridge, simply because I don't want to be feeding my sourdough every single day. I just don't have the time to do that right now, and so that's kind of where my journey is at with feeding a sourdough. This is the end of this video. If you want to check out, I have a whole sourdough playlist ready to go for you guys. From here, the sourdough is ready to be baked and used, turned into bread and all sorts of stuff. Yesterday's discard got turned into okonomiyaki, which is a cabbage pancake that everybody really enjoyed. So that recipe will be down below for you guys too. But I just want to wish you happy sourdough baking.